Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
2 recommendations if you do go. Don't go during induction weekend because it's just too busy and too crowded. That's one thing. And the second thing is make sure while you're in Cooperstown to get some fudge.
I love it. Big fudge endorsement.
Yes.
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Okay, Skip. So today we're going to list off the biggest sports scumbags. But before we get to that, I have 2 things I need to tell you. Well, one thing I need to tell you and one thing I need to ask you, actually. First, a correction. So in an earlier episode, I mentioned that the Canadian hockey uniforms, the black ones, which I didn't like, were black with black numbers and black letters. Turns out I was wrong. They were black, but they had red numbers and red letters. So at least it was a little bit easier to see the numbers and the letters. But still, I did not like the uniforms. Just wanted to correct myself there.
No, the uniforms that they wore, the men and the women in the Olympics, were not good. They were not good at all.
Well, 2 of them were. The third one wasn't.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just they only wore that one time, you know?
Well, they didn't play that many games, so they wore each uniform like once or twice.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I stand corrected. So the main thing I want to talk to you about is I'm finally up to date on Ozark, and I have 7,000 questions for you.
I can't wait. Let's talk Ozark. It's so funny because we got together with some friends like a few weeks ago, and I started talking with one of the people who was there about Ozark. And then one of the other people who was at the table was like, don't talk about Ozark, don't talk about Ozark, don't say anything. So then we got together with the same group last week. And as soon as I walked in, I said, am I allowed to talk about Ozark tonight? And he's like, yes, we can talk about it now. Okay,
great. So I have a lot of questions, and I don't know if you have the answers, but...
Okay, so first, before you start, spoilers, major spoilers. So if you haven't watched season 7 of Ozark, fast forward about 5 minutes because we're going to give away a lot of stuff.
Right. I worry that this might take more than 5 minutes, but we'll try.
Okay.
So the FBI agent Maya, she has known all along what Marty and Wendy are doing. So my first question to you is, why hasn't she arrested them already?
I don't think she has the proof. Because Marty's system is so sophisticated, I don't think she has all the proof. And then even maybe if she does, they don't want to arrest Marty and Wendy. They want to go for the bigger fish, which is obviously, you know, the head of the cartel, right? I think that's why.
Okay, you're probably right, but still, like the way they talk, like Marty doesn't even really hide the fact that he's buddies with Omar.
No, he doesn't at all.
So it's like she knows what he's doing.
Yeah, she knows.
So this is one thing I didn't understand. Okay, the next thing I understand is, so there's this whole plan in place, right? Marty and Wendy orchestrate this plan with the FBI that they're going to bring in Omar and he's going to sort of give himself up because he wants to get out of the business and he just wants to like ride off into the sunset and be able to be a free man. And if you want to go after his nephew, go after his nephew. He doesn't care.
Right.
So the whole plan is in place and then they show up at this like abandoned shopping mall or something.
It was weird, eh? The shopping mall, yeah.
It was. And then all of a sudden, the tables get turned. Like the FBI says and does things that no one expected. Even Maya, who's an FBI agent, she was stunned by the whole thing.
But the tables got turned even more after that.
Hold on, let me do this chronologically because I already don't understand it, so don't go skip ahead yet.
Okay.
So I didn't understand why the tables got turned there, first of all, and I don't understand why Maya wasn't in the loop. So
well, Maya's boss tried to explain to her that, yeah, we could arrest him right now, but then someone else is just going to take over. So it's not like we can't ever get rid of all the drugs and we can't ever get rid of all the cartels. So what they want to do is control him for amount of time. So like if we can control him, I don't necessarily agree with this, right? But like she says, like if we can control Navarro for like 5 years, that's like a bonus for us and we can do all kinds of good based on that. But of course Maya is out for justice. She just wants to arrest everyone, which is what ends up happening, right?
So, okay, then we go to the next thing. So the FBI basically stabs her in the back, like,
yes,
because she was not expecting that. And then, so the deal's in place. Navarro agrees to the 5-year thing. And I guess he's on his way back home. All of a sudden, he gets arrested. Maya goes rogue, I guess.
Well, that's the one part that I wasn't clear on. It's the real one part of the season that I really don't definitely know the answer to. Like, did she go rogue and stab the other FBI people in the back where they basically couldn't stop her because she's arresting the guy? Like, she's got all this evidence. They can't say don't arrest him. Like, I don't know what her motivation was. Like, was it really to just, like, be the best FBI agent she could be? Like, and get this guy in jail? Or is there something more? Like, I didn't understand, like, why she just did that. You know, like, it was really quite shocking, actually.
So I didn't understand it either, but let's assume you're right. How did she get the rest of the FBI agents to work with her? Like, does she not need approval for something like that? You can't just go do it on your own.
No, but I think she's fairly senior. Like, she controls, like, teams of agents, you know? Like, you saw that when they tried to seize the trucks, you know?
True.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I don't know. I really, like, I'm actually not 100% convinced that the whole arrest is on the up and up. I think maybe that the arrest is, like, she's got some kind of deal with Navarro, and he's only in jail, like, temporarily. Like, I really don't know. Like, the show could do all kinds of stuff, like...
I found that the last episode, they sort of fast-forwarded through a lot of things, and they didn't explain it as well as I would have liked. Whereas the previous episodes were like slow and deliberate, and they explained everything to you.
There's a lot of stuff that's like they don't explain. They never really fully explained like why this Bird Charitable Foundation is so important. Like, why is it so important to them? Like, I understand why it's important to Wendy because she's a psychopath and she loves it. She loves like grasping for power and sort of playing like political chess with opponents, you know, like she likes that the game. She likes the game, right? So she's proud of this Bird Foundation, but like I don't understand how it's going to help them. Like I just don't. I'm not 100% sure like why it's so important to them to get their freedom, you know?
Then Wendy goes and visits Omar in jail. At the same time, Marty is getting beaten up by, is it Javi? Is that his name?
Yeah, the nephew.
So Marty's getting beaten up by him, and somehow he doesn't kill him, like his life is spared.
Somehow. Yeah.
And so then apparently now the FBI is going to do the same deal they were going to do with Omar. They're now going to do it with Javi, except instead of 5 years, it's 10 years. Is that correct?
I think so. I think so. But like everything went so quick, like you said in the last episode. It's like you can't even sort of know exactly what's going to happen, you know? Because then they could just arrest him. Like they could just arrest him too.
Right, and why would Javi, who's like, you know, he's a loose cannon to begin with, why would he agree to any of that?
Well, maybe he feels like he can do stuff now without worrying about being arrested. Like, I don't know if the threat of arrest, how big of a deal they think it is. You know?
I mean, he doesn't seem to care about anyone or anything. Like, he's killed cops or whatever, so I'm surprised he would even agree to talk to them, let alone agree to the deal.
You're right. He just walks around in the United States killing people, and he doesn't seem to care about, like, worry about justice, you know? Like,
right. So, anyway, that confused me. Yeah. I guess, hopefully, it'll all be explained in the next episode, but...
I don't know about that.
I have a few other unrelated questions, still about Ozark, but not about that story. Mm-hmm. First of all, I have to tell you that every time Wyatt kisses Darlene, I want to vomit.
Disgusting. Well, they're not going to be doing any more kissing now.
Right, exactly. Thank God. Like, I want to vomit every time I see
Darlene. Her. Like, Darlene is the one character that deserved to die. Like, she deserved to die, and she finally got what was coming to her because she thinks she's, like, untouchable. But when they killed Wyatt, it was like... It was shocking, you know, like I felt so bad. And I mean, how great is Julia Garner? Like, my God, like the last 5 minutes of that episode where she's screaming and freaking out and shaking, like the anger, you know, like it's unbelievable, you know?
Well, speaking of Julia Garner, also known as Ruth.
Yeah.
Ruth goes to visit somebody, a girl in a wheelchair who gives her all these like seeds to plant. Who is that girl? I've never seen her before.
I think it's like a friend of her mom. Like, we've never seen her mom. We did see her dad in earlier episodes.
Right.
But I think it's like a friend of her mom. But like, yeah, I don't know. It was weird because they just bring in this character and they expect you to know who she is. And then meanwhile, you're starting to doubt yourself. Like, because like you said, because it's been like so long since season 1. Like season 1 was so long ago, right? So you wonder, like, am I supposed to know who this person is? Or am I not supposed to know who this person is? You start to like wonder, you know, but...
That's exactly what I was saying to myself as I was watching that scene.
But it seems to me like Ruth was trying to leave. Like she was going to leave.
Yes.
Only because Wyatt didn't want to leave is what sort of changed, like, screwed
Right.
her plan. But I saw the trailer for part 2 of season 7. I don't know if you saw the little mini trailer.
I didn't see it yet, no.
It's coming out April 27, I want to say. But anyway, April 20 something. The trailer that they had for the second part of the season it's all about Ruth. The whole trailer was Ruth.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it looks like Ruth's going to get her revenge on everybody. By the way, when I say that Darlene deserved to die,
Yes.
the other character that deserves to die is Wendy Bird. I can't stand her. She makes me want to throw up. She makes my blood boil, that Wendy Bird.
Well, Omar likes her, or at least he did.
Well, respects her, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm done with my Ozark questions, so we can move on to listener mail.
Mailbag.
Listener mail. I got a whole bunch, Josh. As you know, like, we did our favorite songs of the 80s, which is like a kind of topic that, people always have opinions on, right? People our age, are always nostalgic for the 80s. So our good friend Jesse in Texas gave me 10 albums, but like me, he said he could have put all the Springsteen albums. So he had some different ones than us based on, his taste in music. So Brian Wilson was on his list, Linda Ronstadt, Sarah Hickman, Paul Simon Graceland is one that we didn't really mention, or maybe it was one of our honorable mentions. I don't remember. U2, The Joshua Tree, Queen, The Game. I didn't even consider that. He had Bruce Springsteen, Tunnel of Love. So I think he likes that album more than any of the other albums of the 80s. And then, like, you just did a correction about the uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw Jesse's list and number 2 on his list was John Hyatt, Bring the Family, I realized I had made a grave mistake by just forgetting about it. I didn't even talk about it in my honorable mentions or anything. And I had emailed Jesse saying, like, for some reason, I always think that's a 90s album, but it's not. It's like 88 or 89, so.
And yes, I know how big a John Hyatt fan you are, so I'm surprised you didn't mention it.
Yeah. So then, on Facebook, I put on my personal Facebook asking all my Facebook friends to tell me their favorite albums of the 80s. Now, I don't know if any of these people actually listened to the podcast or they just wrote in their answers, but I'm going to tell you, like, some of the answers we got.
Let's hear it.
Danny from Dollard here in near me said David Bowie 2, which is a greatest hits. Now, obviously, we've excluded greatest hits albums, so that doesn't apply. Joel in New Jersey, Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits. Robbie Robertson, the same album that I had, and the Symphony Sessions by Tom Cochrane. Now, obviously, that's a live album. We wouldn't count that. Good friend of the show now, Natalie, here in Pierrefonds. She gave me her definitive top 3. Purple Rain, Prince, Michael Jackson, Thriller, and then Madonna. And she said, come on, these albums represent the 80s in a nutshell. Like, there's nothing more 80s than these, right?
She's not wrong.
She's not wrong. Sean in Montreal, U2, The Joshua Tree. Rich in Chicago, Synchronicity by The Police. He listed all the Bruce Springsteen albums from the 80s, including the live 75 to 85, but also Bryan Adams, Cuts Like a Knife, Live Bullet, Bob Seger, Scarecrow, John Cougar Mellencamp, Up to Here, The Tragically Hip. Shout out for your number 1.
Nice.
U2, The Joshua Tree, obviously. 1984 Van Halen is actually one that we didn't mention, so that's a cool one. Jeff here in Dollard, Born in the USA, Thriller, Joshua Tree. Jason in Côte St. Luc, Born in the USA. Ray Momo by David Byrne, an album that I'm not familiar with. Let's Dance by David Bowie. He's a huge Bowie fan. Once Upon a Time by Simple Minds, and Blaze of Glory by Joe Jackson. I had Joe Jackson in my list, but
I thought Blaze of Glory was a song by John Bon Jovi.
It is, but it's also an album by Joe Jackson. It came out in the late 80s. It's a good album, but maybe I need to re-listen to it. I don't know. Wendy here in Montreal, Born in the USA, Purple Rain, and Thriller. Tanya here in Dollar Days or Mo, Billy Joel Greatest Hits. Obviously, we didn't include Greatest Hits, so that disqualifies that. Misha, Ville Saint Laurent, in your old stopping grounds, Josh.
Yep.
Joshua Tree, Synchronicity, The Police, and So, Peter Gabriel, Kick, and Excess, all albums that we mentioned. And finally, my sister said The Joshua Tree, Born in the USA, and The Indigo Girls, which is one that you shouted out. She also mentioned other ones: Tracy Chapman, Melissa Etheridge, Depeche Mode, Prince. And she said that she knew as she listened to the show, as the list was unfolding, when we got to number 1, she knew that the Smiths was going to be my number 1. I'm not sure how she knew that, but she said she did. So
Nice.
that's the very long listener mail. And thank you for everybody who listens and who just even wrote in on Facebook to tell us their favorite albums of the 80s. Much, very much appreciated.
Okay, so let's get to the topic of the day, which is biggest scumbags in sports, and I will explain the category.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at first you had it as most hated
sports
people
figures.
In sports figures, non-athlete.
Correct.
That was the category.
Then,
yeah, go ahead.
Just to go over the ground rules, you can't be a current athlete. It has to be like an owner or an agent or a general manager or a coach or the leader of a union, for example. Anybody that's
spoilers.
anybody that's not an actual player.
Right. I mean, we had exchanged texts during the week, and I told you I was ready with my sports scumbags list, and you were like, "That's a great name for the list." So that's sort of what we've been calling it up till today, which is kind of interesting.
Now, normally you always ask me how I went about compiling my list, but let me nip this in the bud and tell you that when I first thought about this, I think a month ago or maybe more. It took me about 7 seconds to do this entire list. I've done absolutely zero research because I don't need to do any research on this. Yeah. And I'm just ready to go.
You're ready to go. Okay. I want to tell you my honorable mentions because I have a bunch.
Please, go ahead.
Jack Edwards, play-by-play announcer for the Boston Bruins.
Oh, that's a good one. Thank you for including him. I didn't even know his name, but yes, that's a good one.
Bobby Knight, obviously, you know, when you choke an athlete player on your team, you know, you deserve to be mentioned here. Mm-hmm. Jerry Jones, owner of the Cowboys. I mean, obviously, I have a huge hate for the Cowboys, and Jerry Jones is a very, very easy person to dislike. Mm-hmm. Tony La Russa, mostly only from the last few years where he's really become this cranky old man, you know, like he's one of the most winningest managers in history, but like, you know.
Oh, no, success has nothing to do with it. You can be very successful and still be on this list.
Yeah. John Tortorella, although, like, you know.
He makes me laugh.
I do have more of a respect for Tortorella because I think it's more of a show, you know, like his shtick. Nick Saban, like, I mean, obviously.
Oh, that's a very good one. I'm upset I didn't include him.
And then Scott Boras, which he's probably in your list, but.
All right, I like it. Okay, so since this is my category, I have to go first, correct?
Well, I mean, a few weeks ago, you asked me if I could go first all the time.
Okay, but we're not going to do that because that's not fair to you.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
Number 7.
Okay, so number 7 for me. By the way, the only hard part of this list is all 7 of these people, well, at least the top 5, are all tied for first place. And I didn't know how to split them up.
That's what I said to you before we started. Like, my top 4 is for sure probably the same as your top 4. I'm really confident about that, but maybe just in a different order.
Right.
Like, I don't know, but yeah. Anyway, so let's hear like 7, 6,
so
5.
Number 7. You mentioned his name earlier. It's Scott Boras. He's a player agent, and he's on this list because, first of all, he represents I don't know how many baseball players, but he has way too much influence. Not just on his own players, but on the teams that they play for and the league itself, because he holds everyone ransom. Like, he's complaining about teams like Baltimore, for example, who are tanking and don't spend a lot of money and saying that they're ruining the game. They're not ruining the game. That's exactly what the Houston Astros did a few years ago. They tanked. They were lousy. They built up their team via the draft, and then they ended up winning the World Series. Now, we're not going to get into the whole, cheating thing, but if you want to lose, if you're an owner of a team and you want to lose to try to build up your team, that's up to you. No player agent should dictate what other teams are doing. And he's just so arrogant and smug. And every single guy on this list, I want to punch him in the head.
The thing with Boras is he tells his players, you're going to free agency. He tells them, you're going to free agency after the season. No question about it. And then they listen to him, And I wish players would learn and look at history, because history of baseball specifically is riddled with players who took a big contract to change scenery and they screwed up their career. Yeah, they got their big payday, but they would have got their big payday anyways, You're right. I told you, I knew Scott Boras was on your list, but anyways. All right, so we're going to the world of broadcasting, Josh.
You know what? I don't have any broadcasters, but I should have probably put a few.
Skip Bayless, currently from Fox Sports.
Yes.
He used to be on ESPN doing First Take with Stephen A. Smith.
Oh, that's right. That's where I recognize
Fox Sports stole him away. This is the only guy on Twitter who made me unfollow him because of the ridiculous things that he tweets. Like, I followed him on Twitter, and then after a certain point, I was like, I cannot follow this guy anymore. I don't want to hear what he has to say. He makes me so angry. He tweets in all caps half the time also. It's just so frustrating. But, like, can I tell you, there's websites dedicated to the worst takes ever by Skip Bayless? Because even if he deletes the tweets, they're there forever because people screenshot them.
I'm glad people do that.
So about Cam Newton, I think Cam can be a good NFL quarterback, but I think Tebow, given Cam's opportunity and support, can be better.
There you go.
Skip Bayless, May 2014. Johnny Manziel will one day be bigger in Cleveland than his buddy LeBron ever was. That's
oh my
the best
God.
one ever. That's the best one ever. Long term, give me Josh Freeman over Cam Newton. Better leader, more consistent passer.
I don't even know who Josh Freeman is.
He had a cup of coffee for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at one point. And then there's more and more. Like, there's so many, like, of Skip Bayless's greatest misses. Like, it's a joke. Like, it's a running joke on Twitter. Anyway, so I heard a podcast with Troy Aikman once, and he told a story. He hated Skip Bayless. Skip is based in Dallas, so he used to write about the Cowboys. And he wrote some stuff about Troy Aikman that, I mean, we don't need to get into, but about his personal life. And Aikman apparently called his agent and said, next time Skip Bayless is in the dressing room, what's going to happen if I punch him in the face?
I think I asked you a similar question once like that.
Yeah, he's like, how much money is it going to cost me? Should I do it or not? And his agent told him, don't do it. It's going to cost you too much. So then he didn't.
I would have loved to have seen that. That reminds me of, remember when the Atlanta Braves, I think, won the World Series this is a long time ago when they had Deion Sanders on the team.
Yeah. Well, they only won once, right? I think in that whole era, 95.
So anyway, there was a time where the Braves were celebrating in the dugout in their clubhouse, and Deion Sanders was there. And remember, this was when he was going back and forth between playing baseball and football. And there were some people who didn't agree with what he was doing. And one of those people was Tim McCarver, and Tim McCarver was very vocal about it. And in the celebration, in the clubhouse, there was an altercation between Deion Sanders and Tim McCarver.
I love it. Deion's great. He doesn't take crap from anybody.
Yeah, he is.
Number 6.
Okay, number 6, Bill Belichick. I can't stand Bill Belichick. I mean, there are tons of people who can't stand Bill Belichick. First of all, he doesn't even answer questions during press conferences. I don't know why they bother asking him questions because he doesn't answer. They're like, I understand you don't want to divulge your game plan for the next game. He rarely admits that he's wrong, if ever. He rarely admits that the other team played well and did a good job. He's another person whose face I want to punch.
What do you think having a 37-year-old?
We're on to Cincinnati. It's nothing about the past, nothing about the future. Right now, we're preparing for Cincinnati.
Okay, do you feel like the talent you have here is good?
We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
I don't think he's as bad. Like, I don't have the hatred for Belichick that you do, but I understand that there's tons of people that can't stand him. But he's really a lot like Marshawn Lynch, going in front of the press saying, I'm only here to do the press conference so I don't get fined. That's what he does every time he steps up to the podium after a game. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to be there.
But he has to. It's part of his job. Like, any head coach on any team in any sport is required to do that. So if you don't want to do that, then don't do that job.
No, but then don't do that job.
Don't be a head coach.
Right. He knows it's part of his job, right?
And how difficult is it really? Like, honestly, you're just sitting there answering questions. There are jobs out there that are actually difficult jobs to do. But all you have to do is sit there and answer questions about a football game. Come on. You're
right. Okay. So you're not going to like my number 6 because he's not such a scumbag. I feel kind of bad for including him in the scumbag. It's just that I just don't like him.
That's a perfectly legitimate reason to put him on your list.
And that's ESPN hockey analyst Barry Melrose. Now,
does he still have a mullet?
He does. That's part of the reason why I don't like him. So the thing with Barry Melrose is it could also be ESPN. Like, it's just as much ESPN that I dislike because he's been on ESPN forever, right? Except he stopped doing hockey commentary because he came back to coaching for a few years, coaching Tampa, like I don't know how many years ago, and then he went back to ESPN. But he's really contributed to the dumbing down of the American sports fan when it comes to the National Hockey League. Like, he is directly responsible for the dumbing down of hockey to American fans because he's the only person they've ever seen for like 25 years on ESPN talking about hockey. The reason why I really don't like him is because he's admitted on the air that he can't stand the Montreal Canadiens because he lost to them in the finals in '93, the famous Jacques Demers measuring the stick incident, and
right.
he still can't get over that. And you mentioned his hair. His hair is indicative of the fact that he can't get over that because his hair is stuck in 1993.
Well, that's an excellent choice.
Number 5.
Next for me is NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. The reasons, right. the list of reasons why he's on this list are too lengthy to name them all. First of all, he doesn't care about Canada. I don't care what he says openly or publicly, but he doesn't care about Canada. If he did, there would be a hockey team in Quebec City, but there isn't. He will do anything to avoid adding another Canadian team to the NHL.
Well, we have the proof of it right now because the Arizona Coyotes are going to play in like a local little civic arena. Like, they're going to play in the arena of one of the colleges like nearby.
Arizona State,
like
yes.
5,000 capacity, if that, right? Like, right. He's playing in an arena where my kid used to play hockey in places that size.
Well,
you know?
The Coyotes are his precious little child that he created, and he will do it until the day he dies. He will make sure that the Coyotes stay in the state of Arizona. Oftentimes, like once or twice a year, he has like his State of the League address, and then he gets interviewed by Ron MacLean. And Ron MacLean actually asks some good questions. But again, similar to Bill Belichick, Gary Bettman doesn't answer the questions. Gary Bettman just talks about something that he wants to talk about, which may have nothing to do with the question that Ron MacLean asked. And then, you know, there are teams in the league that are struggling financially. And I'm not talking about because of COVID. I'm talking about like 5 or 10 years ago, before anyone knew the word COVID. There were teams that were struggling, you know, for example, like I think maybe the Carolina Hurricanes and you know, now the Florida Panthers are a good team and they're very high in the standings. But so I don't know how many fans they draw, but not that long ago, there weren't many fans going to Florida Panther games. So when he's asked about like, what are your plans to do with some of these struggling franchises, he says none of our franchises are struggling. Like, he just makes stuff up. He's not saying factual things. Then, of course, I don't need to remind you what happened with the whole Kyle Beach thing. They had a press conference afterwards, and he was, you know, yes, he's a lawyer, and he talked like a lawyer, and he had no. It was so almost like he was completely tone deaf to the situation. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. Another thing, and this is like basically before he was the commissioner, the NHL head office was in Canada. It was in Toronto, and they also, I think, had a smaller office in Montreal. They moved everything to the United States. So a lot of Canadian people lost jobs, and now a lot of those jobs were taken by American people. Another thing that frustrates me about him.
I'm going to talk about him in my list, like further up the list. Surprised he's only number 5 for you. It's pretty low. Right. No? Well, again, the top 5, I could have flipped them anyway. Right. So number 5 for me is a former NFL head coach by the name of Chip Kelly.
Oh, so I know who he is, but I'm surprised he's on your list.
This is like former Eagles coach. I've never seen a coach run out of town so badly as he was in San Francisco, in Philadelphia, sorry. And then he ruined the 49ers right after because he coached one season in San Francisco when they went 2-14 and he got fired there too. This is the only coach where I actually really thought that he was going to get fired at halftime of a game. That would have been funny. It was the Thanksgiving Day game against the Detroit Lions, and I was like, I think that they might fire him during the game Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come out at halftime. It was that bad. Um, so like that's, I mean, I can go into so many reasons. Like he really like came in and said it's going to be my way or the highway, and he got rid of a lot of fan favorites like Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy for no reason.
Number 4.
Okay, so knowing the ones you've already listed, and I think I know who you're going to list for your remaining people.
Yeah.
I don't think this next guy on my list made it to yours.
Okay, who's that?
It's Donald Fear.
Okay, what number are you on? Number 4, right?
I'm on 4.
Okay, Donald Fear is 4 on my list.
Okay. Well, then there's someone else on my list that isn't on yours.
I guess.
Okay.
We'll
Anyway,
find out.
we'll get to that later. So Donald Fear. So I give Donald Fear at least 50% of the blame for the 1994 World Series not happening. And we all know how 1994 is a very emotional thing for me to talk about, and you as well, I think, because the Montreal Expos had the best record in baseball. The season was halted in August. They never finished the season. They never played the playoffs, and we didn't have a World Series winner. Now, I'm not saying that Montreal would have definitely won the World Series. Who knows? 1,000,001 things could have happened, but I would have liked to at least seen what would have happened. And Donald Fear is at least 50% to blame for the fact that we didn't get to see that. And for the rest of my life, I will hate him.
Now, one thing you mentioned, now, like, you know that like baseball right now is in a lockout, right?
Yes.
One thing to remember about 94, that was a strike. That was the players who said, we're walking out. And he was the head of the Players Association. Now, one thing to mention about Donald Fear, he's the current executive director of the NHL Players Union.
Right.
So this guy is exactly responsible for work stoppages in 2 leagues. 2 leagues.
And also, he also has a face that you want to punch. Like, all of these guys have a face that you want to punch.
Right. Yeah. Oh, Donald Fear. When I see him on my TV, my blood pressure goes up. Big. And one thing that like a guy like Donald Fear and other union executives and the owners and all of baseball right now could take a lesson. Like, playing the games is important, right? No one wants to be going on their Twitter feed seeing that they're not negotiating, the deadlines have passed, we're not going to play, the World Series is canceled, the season is canceled in hockey. You know, no one wants to hear that, right? Playing the games is important. If you don't play the games, nothing happens. Like, we don't need to talk about you, right? So I think Donald Fear, anyways, look, he's a lawyer, like you said. What are you going to do?
So I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it again. Now that there's this lockout by Major League Baseball, and they're negotiating, and already like spring training games have been missed, and looks like the start of the season is not going to happen. If Montreal had a team, I'd be so upset right now. But because they don't, I don't care.
I'm actually rooting for the season to get canceled. I want to see how badly they could screw it up.
Me too.
Both sides.
Yeah.
Both sides, right?
Me too.
Yeah.
Number 3.
I was saying how Donald Fear was responsible for 50% of what happened in 1994. The other 50% of the blame goes to Bud Selig. You know how much I hate Bud Selig, because when we went to Cooperstown for the Tim Raines induction ceremony, Bud Selig was also inducted that day. And when he went up on stage, I was booing so loudly, I think you were embarrassed to be standing next to me. And I
wasn't embarrassed to be standing next to you. I was actually worried that the security was going to come and take you away.
But we were outdoors. Where were they going to take me?
I don't know, but it was so loud and so noticeable. It was like, oh my God.
And the day before, actually, they had this like parade on that main street in Cooperstown where all the inductees were in cars. And when Bud Selig's car passed, I was booing vociferously. And I cannot stand this guy because, yes, he's also a big chunk of the blame for what happened in 1994. And for them to cancel the season and not have a World Series for the only time in more than 100 years to not have a World Series champion, and of course it happened to be the season where our team had a good chance to win it, I will never forgive him for that.
I'm at number 3, and that's Gary Bettman, and we already talked about Gary Bettman, so there's not much more to say. One thing that you didn't mention of all the like shortcomings of Mr. Bettman, all the stuff about concussions. He to this day, he just refuses to admit that headshots and brain injuries is a problem, basically. Like, he doesn't want to do anything about it. Like, they have this so-called player safety committee, Department of Player Safety, which is an absolute joke. And like, I don't know, Bettman just he just gets my blood boiling, you know? Like, look, he's been the commissioner since what, 1993, I think, right? And they've had work stoppages more than any other. They have work stoppages all the time. They lost a whole season in 04-05. A whole season. They didn't play for a whole year, right? So, I mean, that's Bettman. But one thing was interesting because Bettman gets booed everywhere, right?
Yes.
Everywhere he goes. But I kind of respect him because he owns it. Like, he's like, bring it on. He knows it's coming now, right? The one thing that I didn't get is they had the expansion draft in Vegas, right?
Well, they had it in Vegas and they had it in Seattle as well.
It was Seattle, so not Vegas. I'm thinking of Seattle. And he got up there and they booed him. The fans in Seattle, they booed him. But, like, they have no reason to boo him. He brought them a team.
They don't even know him yet.
Like, he's actually responsible for getting them the team. And still, somehow, his reputation of, like, the biggest weasel.
Weasel, that's a perfect word, weasel.
Yeah, it trumps the fact that he got them a team, and they're going to boo him anyways. Like, it's like they know. Bettman comes out, you got to boo. It's like some kind of instinct.
Another thing, and this isn't really Gary Bettman's fault, but it bothers me to no end. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's still the commissioner. He hasn't even finished his term as commissioner, and he's already in the Hockey Hall of Fame. This drives me completely nuts.
Bud Selig is in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but at least he retired before they put him in.
Correct,
right?
correct.
Number 2.
So number 2 for me is David Samson. David Samson was at one time the president of the Montreal Expos, and you mentioned the word weasel a few seconds ago. I mean, if you look up weasel in the dictionary, I think David Samson's photo is there because he is a weasel.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah, he is.
I mean, I'm not going to go over all the things that he said and did while he was the president of the Expos, but you do recall the interview that he did with Ariel Helwani a few years ago, and then he did another interview with somebody else, which was a very similar interview, and he just was very weaselly, if that's even a word, on both those interviews. He didn't care about the fans in Montreal. He didn't care about the city of Montreal. You know, he just wanted to get in and out of there as quickly as possible. He is 50% to blame for Montreal not having a baseball team right now.
I agree with that. I mean, look, I give him a lot of credit because he goes out and he does these interviews and he doesn't shy away from taking questions about all the bad stuff that he did, even though he doesn't think it's bad stuff. I mean, even today, Josh, he's feuding with Jeff Passan on Twitter today about like that the owners don't make as much money as you think. And I'm like, give me a freaking break, buddy. Come on.
You know, I think David Samson now has a job as a baseball analyst on CBS. How did he even get that job?
I don't know.
What does he know about baseball?
I mean, he's directly responsible for ruining baseball in 2 cities. Not just, you only talked about Montreal, but they gutted the Florida market completely.
Right. I mean, right? I can only worry about one city at a time.
So number 2 for me, you already talked about him. It's Bud Selig. So it's kind of weird because we have the same stuff, but different orders. So Bud Selig, he was the commissioner of baseball from 92 till 2015. Like you said, he directly he tried to contract the Expos, first of all.
Oh, I forgot that. Thank you for adding that. Yes.
Tried to just get rid of the team. And then eventually the Expos got sold. It was sort of owned by baseball because we didn't have another owner. That's not necessarily his fault because we didn't have an owner, but whatever. But, he also presided over like the steroid era and sort of just brushed it off. Like no one never really took any responsibility for it. Look, the 94 strike, no World Series, 94, Yes, baseball grew during the time he was commissioner. But if you look right now, all the decisions that he made over his tenure have caused more harm than good in baseball. Because baseball's in real big trouble right now. Even before COVID, attendance was declining. Their TV deals are a mess. They can't figure out what to do with the national TV deal vis-a-vis streaming and stuff. It's like they're really like way behind the times in so many things that they're feeling it now, right? Like they're really feeling it now because they're in such a situation that if there's a work stoppage right now, it's not his fault that there will be a work stoppage, but if there's a work stoppage right now, baseball's in big trouble. Like big trouble.
So you said that when the Montreal baseball team was sold to Major League Baseball, it wasn't his fault that no one in Montreal wanted to buy the team. You're right, it wasn't his fault. But it was partly his fault that once the league owned the team, they didn't put any resources into it. They didn't try to make the team better. They didn't try to help the team win. In fact, they tried to strip the team of all their few good assets. So I do blame him for that.
Not only that, I don't know if you remember, I don't remember what year it was, and the Expos were actually contending for a wild card spot.
Somehow, yes, I couldn't believe it, yes.
They wouldn't allow expanding the roster on September 1st for them to call up all these extra players from the minors. They wouldn't allow us to call up more players because they didn't want to pay them.
Unreal. Like, just unreal.
Right? Like we're talking about a spit in the bucket in terms of like an operating cost for a baseball team.
This episode has got me more riled up than I expected it would. I was trying. I told myself before we started to record that I needed to be calm, but I haven't been able to do that.
Number 1.
So what do you have at number 1? I don't understand.
Well, number 1 for me is Jeffrey Loria.
Okay, so that's where the disconnect is between us, because I have Loria and Samson number 1.
Okay.
It's together.
Well, I split them up.
So why do you think Loria has more like blame than Samson?
So the difference between the two of them is so slim. Like, honestly, I could have put either one of them at number 1, but Jeffrey Loria was the one who actually purchased the team with his money, and he was the owner. I mean, at the time, I guess he owned 50% of the team until eventually he owned more and more and more of it. But, if not for Jeffrey Loria, David Samson, no one ever knows who David Samson is, because Loria purchased the team. Loria was the one who appointed David Samson the president. So to me, Loria gets a fraction more percentage of the blame than David Samson does.
Okay, that's fair. Look, I have them as number 1. I'll just read you what I wrote. These two are definitely most responsible for the demise of the Expos franchise, no question asked. They share the most of the blame. There's many other blame to go around, but they have the biggest share. They are dirtbags who let down a whole city and then ran away and cried to Bud Selig when things didn't go their way. That's exactly what happened.
Right.
To me, that's exactly what happened. They got into a situation here. They didn't know what to do. And when they couldn't figure out what to do, they just cried to Major League Baseball and said, help us figure out what to do.
And as you mentioned, they went and did the same thing in Florida a few years later.
Yeah, and exactly what I wrote. They were responsible for the demise of baseball in 2 cities, and they screwed over 2 fan bases. And what's worse is David Samson sort of seems proud of it. That's where it's like, that's the extra, salt in the wound, because he goes and he does all these interviews and he talks about how his vast experience as a baseball executive and all the things that he did. Like, all the things that he did, he screwed up 2 cities. He screwed up 2 franchises. That's all the things that he did, right? Well, we certainly talked about a lot of scumbags. My blood pressure is high. This podcast episode sort of goes against our guiding principle, which is it's supposed to be like therapeutic, and I think it maybe was the opposite.
I think you're right.
So, we'll have to come up with a much more relaxing topic next time.
We will.
The Skip and Josh podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen to the show through Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. To interact with the show, send an email to skipandjoshshow@gmail.com. Follow the show on Twitter and go to Facebook to like the show page. And now for some final thoughts from the guys.
So do you have anything you want to end the show with?
Yes, I do actually.
Let's hear it.
So you recall a few months ago, I think it might have been 6 months ago, we did an episode similar to this one where we talked about our most hated / annoying / dirtiest hockey players.
Correct, yes.
So I bring this up because your number 1 from that day and my number 1 from that day, not the same person, were both in the news recently. My number 1 was Brad Marchand and your number 1 was Sean Avery. So Brad Marchand was in the news recently because he did another idiotic thing where he put his stick in a goalie's face and he got suspended for 6 games and felt that it was too severe a suspension. I don't think it was enough. But
no, it wasn't enough at all. It wasn't enough at all.
I know. And then interestingly enough, Boston recently played Colorado, and Nazem Kadri, who plays for Colorado, was interviewed. Kadri, who isn't exactly the poster boy for like the Lady Byng trophy, he said that Marchand's suspension was too long. So that tells you all you need to know about Nazem Kadri.
Because that's Kadri already lobbying the NHL Department of Player Safety for his next suspension.
Correct.
Right?
Anyway, just the fact that Marchand got suspended again makes me feel vindicated that I had him number 1 on my list. Now, your number 1, Sean Avery, I don't know if you heard the news.
He signed a deal with like the East Coast Hockey League team or something, right?
Yes. So like, first of all, in your entire life, when a player retires and tries to unretire, how often does that go well?
Not well at all.
Right.
Ever.
Exactly. So
Ever.
I can name you 2, maybe 3 players where it went well. Michael Jordan, and you might even want to say Brett Favre, because he did have one good season when he unretired.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not sure, did Mario Lemieux retire and then unretire?
Well, I mean, he retired because of health reasons.
Right, exactly.
But not because he really wanted to retire.
So other than those 3, it's never gone well.
Never.
So a player should not unretire. Certainly not.
And it's not like, Josh, it's not like Sean Avery was the most talented player.
Well, this is what I was going to say.
with.
Certainly not a 41-year-old player who was never good to begin with. He shouldn't unretire. So anyway, he unretires. He signs his contract with an East Coast Hockey League team, the Solar Bears. And then 2 days later, he's done.
So
But
why did he do it?
I don't know why he did it, but you should read some of his comments when the day he signed. He's like, yeah, I feel like if I work at it for the next 6 months, I can be on an NHL team at the start of next season. Are you drunk? You're 41 years old and you were never good to begin with.
That's just vanity. And we know that Sean Avery is the most vain of all vain players. He's like, I'm in great shape, I could make it. And then when he actually got on the ice, and these 25-year-old scrubs, because they're already in the East Coast Hockey League, they're not even that good. When these other guys who are not even that good are skating circles around him, he probably realized, oh shit, I made a big mistake.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So there we go.
All right, I have very quick, very, very rapid fire comments for the end.
Okay.
Congratulations to the Los Angeles Rams for winning the Super Bowl. We never talked about it.
That's true.
Congratulations to Martin St. Louis being named the head coach of the Montreal Canadiens. And the team's actually seems to look different under him.
I'm worried that they're no longer in last place overall in the league.
Congratulations to the Canadian Olympic women's hockey team who won the gold medal. And anybody in Canada who wants to feel patriotic, all you have to do is go watch the medal ceremony where the entire team sang "O Canada" on the ice. It's absolutely spectacular. Absolutely spectacular.
Believe it or not, I actually didn't see that.
No, it's really great. Like, you gotta go. I'm sure it's on YouTube. You gotta find it. Yeah. And Josh, are you still playing Wordle? It got bought by the New York Times.
Oh, so it's funny because I had a note here I was going to mention, but this episode went too long. So I'm done with Wordle.
Yeah, me too. I'm more or less done with Wordle. But since we last talked about it, it got bought by the New York Times. Like, if you go to Wordle now, it's part of the New York Times.
Yes,
it's really kind of weird.
I did notice that. It became a chore for me. Like, oh my god, I have to play Wordle. I forgot to play Wordle. It's like, and if it's a chore, then what's the point of doing it? By the way, there's also someone alerted me. There's a Jewish version of Wordle.
There's a bunch of other versions now. There's versions with numbers. There's versions with 6 letters, 8 letters.
Yeah. So whatever. I'm done with it.
So great episode, Josh. I think I gotta go relax now because it really got me riled up.
You need a massage, and so do I.
Yeah, we have a short list of topics for the next few episodes. So we got some good stuff coming up, and I guess I'll speak to you next time.
Okay. Have a great week.